Hey guys, so I've got to admit, this one really got to me, and horror movies I'm fine with. But true crime, that hits you in a different way because this actually happened to real people. And honestly, there's a disconnect that happens when it's just fiction versus fact. Well, I say fact with this. When it uses a lot of artistic license, we'll get into that later. But anyway, I could not finish this. Honestly, I got halfway through, then I was done. It was too disturbing even for me, so we'll go into that a little bit more later. So, Monster Season 3 by Ryan Murphy is based on the Ed Gein story. If you're not sure who Ed Gein is, he's left a significant mark on popular culture and the landscape of cinema. He inspired Norman Bates from Bates Motel. From Psycho. I just got finished watching Bates Motel, which is a really good show, by the way. The Silence of the Lambs Killer, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's inspired so many villains, and I was really interested in this because I grew up on shows like Criminal Minds, so I've always been interested in those types of shows that explore the darkness of human nature and what human beings are capable of doing to each other. But still, this is by Ryan Murphy, and look, do you ever get those directors where you just look at them and they're into some really dark stuff behind the scenes, but they're barely hiding it, like 50% of Hollywood, but there's still those ones that really stand out. Ryan Murphy is that guy to me. Look, he is a talented director. I'm not going to deny it. When he is good, he is really good. I love American Horror Story, the first season. I've seen that several times. There's a few other seasons I really enjoy as well. Not quite up to that level, but still, I'm not saying this guy does not have talent. But he focuses so much on over-sexualizing everything, including things that really should never be sexualized, like childhood sexual abuse victims, and adding incestuous gay incest romance subplots, like shoehorning in his own fantasies about attractive young men into absolutely everything that he does. Everything is so over-sexualized, over-politicized, and it's like he has this viewpoint of the world. He can only tell a story through his particular viewpoint, and that makes it so that we can't really see from every angle of the story. Like, yes, I know the Nazis were probably definitely a part of Ed Gein's inspiration. Seeing those horrible, horrific photos of what was done to those poor people during World War II would have moved and disturbed anybody. So yeah, that was probably a part of it. Like, I don't know too much about the real life Ed Gein and his story, but I know from so many reviews I've seen that this is basically historical fiction. Like 90% of it is basically made up and just fluff. But still, I'm sure that was definitely a contributing factor into him. I'm not denying that. But they put so much focus on the Nazis in this show, and of course they're all very one-dimensional, cartoonish villains, all very over the top, and yet the guy that skins people and wears a suit made of human skin is added layers and depth, and we're meant to sympathize with him, and he's portrayed in a very, very sympathetic light in this show. And that is one of my main problems, that this show sexualizes Ed Gein, creates so much sympathy for him, almost paints him as the victim, and completely glosses over the actual victims and their families and the effect like his crimes had on them and what they went through. And it reminds me a bit of Pam and Tommy, if you guys remember that show that came out about Pamela Anderson's leaked sex tape. And she went on air and said she did not want this to be told. It was re-traumatizing her. And yet they did it anyway. And it's the same thing with this. It just feels like there's a very fine line between entertainment and exploitation. And this show definitely crosses that line. It's different with things like Criminal Minds when it's not really based on real people. Yes, they draw inspiration, I'm sure, but this is a real guy with real victims. And as for the show itself, look, I can't really give a full review, but my thoughts are There were too many time jumps and it felt really blurred between the lines of reality and hallucination were hard to distinguish at times. It just felt very unfocused and filled with a lot of filler and fluff that took away from the story. And yes, some of the subplots like the Hitchcock one I found interesting. The stuff around filmmaking I really enjoy, but all the Nazi stuff, Ed and his romance and his hallucinations, I feel like this could have been told in 4 hours. It didn't need 8 hours. So for those people that actually do know about Ed Gein and his actual story and the facts, I'd be interested to know, what did you think of this? How much of this actually does stick to the facts and how much is just made up for shock value and, artistic license? So like I said, I've seen quite a few reviews that say the majority of this is. And it feels like it goes too far at times with shock value when it comes to all the gross stuff. Like, obviously, this is a story of Ed Gein. We know what we're getting. I knew what I was getting going into this. And I decided it would be a good show to watch while eating dinner. That was a big mistake. Anyway, I knew this would be gross, but I did not expect a nipple share. If you know, you know. Yeah, I'm going to have some nightmares about this. He makes a chair out of nipples and other things I don't want to even talk about. And it just feels like we don't need to be shown to this extent. And Charlie Hunnam, look, he did a good job. I'll admit, he was a good actor in this role. I've seen him before. I wasn't really impressed. I watched a few episodes of Sons of Anarchy where he plays another violent mama's boy, which, by the way, the actress that portrayed the mother in this, I don't know her name, but she did a great job. So Charlie Hunnam, look, I feel like, to give him credit, he was acting in the way that he was directed to act, which was very off-putting and awkward in this ridiculous voice. But still, it just made it so unnerving, which was the point. But I don't know. It also felt like they were giving him layers that he didn't have. I've read enough about this guy to know he was a social recluse. He didn't go into town and drink milkshakes and flirt with girls. So even though I do think Ryan Murphy is yet another director wanting to tell a story through his incredibly narrow political lens, with all the delicacy of a bull in a china shop, I do also think this guy has talent. Even though all of the stuff he does is 90% gay fetish thing that rhymes with corn, the other 10%, he truly does have talent. And that's what makes it hard, is this guy is talented. The score was really good, not just the acting. The visuals were really, really good. I was really impressed by the cinematography here. The set design was on another level. Just even the flashbacks, or not flashbacks, like the reimagining of the Texas Chainsaw and stuff was so spot on. This guy does have talent, and the dialogue was deep and thought-provoking in parts. Though it does lean a bit into condescension in parts, it's obvious that Murphy wants the audience to be left with a very particular message, especially when it comes to the Alfred Hitchcock segment, and how he was the one to sort of unleash violence in cinema with Psycho. He did something that had never really been done before. He created a new genre and he gave the general public an appetite, which then every director that came after had to step it up a little bit more every single time to satisfy that new appetite. And I thought that was thought-provoking. Though at the same time, it sort of did feel like Murphy was pointing a finger at Hitchcock a little too hard, sort of like he was saying, you made me do what I do now. Really, no accountability there. So there was this other scene that was slightly condescending, but I do get where he was going with it, and it was truthful, I will admit. That there was this scene where Gein breaks the fourth wall, looks at the camera and says, while doing something particularly disgusting, "You're the one that can't look away." And I'm like, yeah, I feel judged. But I deserve it. So Ed Gein has a love interest in this. Yes, there's a Mrs. Leatherface who is young enough to be his daughter and ignores some really, really giant red flags about him. For example, Gein says to her in surprise one day, "I thought you were dead." Like he was talking about the weather because he'd had a fantasy about killing her, and she doesn't run away screaming. She continues to ignore all the red flags, and I'm like, is this a hallucination? I still don't know. Like I said, I didn't finish the show, so let me know down below with a spoiler tag. You know, I'd really like to know. I think she is probably a hallucination because the way she acts is just so out there. Like, we get this as a character that is meant to be a psychopath and a narcissist, and if she is a hallucination, Gein probably dreamt her up that way as someone who wouldn't be afraid of him and would accept the darkest parts of his nature and encourage him even. Like, she's portrayed as being this free-spirited non-conformist who doesn't want to be a housewife, and fair enough, if that's not what you want to do, fine, but she's portrayed in such a sympathetic light, and yet she's such a horrible person. She has this other housewife who dies, and she encourages Ed to do things to the body. I think you know where I'm going with this, and it's like the show really likes the fact that this is a Christian lady that it is happening to, because all the Christian women who were housewives were painted as these cartoonish villains for daring to have faith and wanting to be homemakers, where the nonconformist sociopath is the, hero of the story, not going with the flow, encouraging Ed Gein to do things to a dead body, and we're meant to be sympathetic to her. Like, I don't know what this show is trying to tell me, but I'm pretty sure I don't like what it's trying to tell me. Anyway, it sexualizes the heck out of this scene, I am telling you, when he does stuff to the body. Yeah. It lingers and draws out this scene for so long. You could just allude to what is happening. Tell, don't show is sometimes the way to go here. But instead, they really draw it out, which just adds to what I was saying, that this show is sexualizing the fact that this is something that happened to real people, real victims, and they cast a very conventionally attractive man, give him a love interest, romanticize him, make him sympathetic, and then linger on these sorts of shots while completely glossing over the ramifications of his crimes and what happened to the real families. Like, yeah, you can't argue that Murphy went into this show with a very deliberate intention. So yeah, ultimately, Ryan Murphy thinks being a Christian homemaker is way too far out there, but somebody who wears a skin suit, yeah, sure, they can have layers of depth given to them and sympathy. Like, yeah, this show had potential, but it lost me. If you've seen the whole thing, I'd really like to know what you guys think down below. What did you think of the first 2 seasons? Let me know what your recommendations are for true crime that actually is true crime, not historical fiction. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more from me. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.